Hello, I'm Dylan.
And I'm Keon.
And this is Trust Your Doctor, that podcast where we can't hear each other because this week we watched Can You Hear Me?
Written by Charlene James and Chris Chibnall.
Directed by Emma Sullivan.
And aired on February 9th, 2020. So
Corona lockdown now in full effect. Keon and I are officially recording for the first time in 6 years. We're recording in two different places.
Yeah, and let's just be clear, when we say the first time in 6 years, that means for the first time ever on this podcast. We've never done this before.
Yeah. So expect a dip in audio quality from the previous weeks. Not that Trust Your Doctor is like the paragon of audio fidelity to begin with.
No, but it's actually not bad. No, it's not bad. It's like good, actually.
Considering, I don't know, some of our newer fans may not know this, considering we started like in my literal garage, like all great bands do.
Well, the garage was actually perfect because it was filled to the brim with wood, so that really dampened the audio and probably also gave us like lung cancer, but
I remember that joke that we haven't made in a while because we haven't recorded in there for 2 years, that we were probably, like, the podcast was probably killing us because, fun fact, sawdust is known to the state of California to cause lung cancer.
But so basically, just a little behind the scenes insight now. The recording setup that we usually use is actually not available to us and will probably never be available to us again. So we'll have to figure out something, once we go back to in person, however many months from now. But for now, this is what it's going to sound like.
Yeah, Trust Your Doctor's in a state of flux when we're trying really hard to still get content out because new content every week till we die.
Right.
It's kind of funny because Triple Play is going to be going out during this time, and that was all recorded like in November of last year. So all of that still sounds like really good.
Yeah, and since we're on the topic, our other podcast, Inevitable, classic sci-fi podcast, is sort of, where we need to get more on top of that because we need to start actually doing that soon.
Remotely as well.
Yeah. And, for you listeners out there, I guess that's more something for us, so we don't need to dive too deep into that, but that'll be coming back soon, if all goes according to plan.
Yeah, which it should.
Right, and we'll be watching Sapphire and Steel on that, so check that out.
Yeah. Check that out.
Yeah, funny actually that this episode would be called "Can You Hear Me?" And it's not complicated. We figured it out and we set it up, but this is the first time we've actually really had to set up a remote, audio call. When it's just the two of us, at least.
And like the first thing Keon said when he picked up the call was, "Can you hear me?" So
I actually didn't do that on purpose, surprisingly enough.
No, I mean, I assume not.
Yeah.
But
since we're talking about behind the scenes stuff, might as well just mention it now. We're actually going to be joined by guests for the next 2 weeks.
Yeah.
We're going to be joined by Keith next week, aka
50.
Yeah. 50
DW50
right.
On Twitter.
Right. And
one of our oldest and longtime fans.
Right. And the week after that, we're going to be joined by Steven, another longtime correspondent, more so on Triple Play, but also on Trust Your Doctor.
Steven, who sent me an email like 3 weeks ago, and I totally forgot it existed, and he messaged me on Facebook, "Hey, did you get my email?" And I'm like, hang on, what? And I had to go dig through the email, and I'm like, oh shoot, we totally didn't respond to this email, so we're going to also respond to that this week.
Yeah.
So
I guess we'll just try and have some semblance of normalcy here and just jump right in, as long as you don't have anything else to say behind the scenes before we start.
No, I think we're both doing pretty hilarious setups individually to try to get the audio quality as good as possible. I know Keon's sitting cross-legged on the floor. I've got a duvet over my head, so it's going to be... We'll see what it sounds like, in post. We'll figure it out in post.
Yeah, and I'm actually going to be doing some post stuff for the first time in 6 years again myself, which is going to be fun. So, yeah.
We're basically just jumping wholehearted into this quarantine lifestyle at this point. I like legitimately, I only left my house to like help my friend carry stuff to his car so he could go back to Utah. Like that's the one time I left my house this week. Well, yeah, so I guess we can just jump right into it and talk about the episode.
Yeah, what we're here to do.
As usual, my first note is I actually have no idea what this week's episode is about again.
Yeah, let me pull up my notes here. Yeah, I didn't know what this one was going to be going into it, and honestly, this one had sort of a Fugitive of the Jadoon effect, where like it ended in a place so different than it started. Not to the same extent as Fugitive, but like I feel like it had that as well, and I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, because I think this one, Fugitive basically changed the entirety of Doctor Who lore at that moment, or at least lore as it had been accepted, because I think to an extent lore isn't created, it's just unearthed. Whereas in this episode, the kind of big change is that the whole vibe of the TARDIS crew has shifted now. We know like all of their biggest fears, and you know, Graham and the Doctor feel very awkward now at the end, and I don't know. It's interesting.
We're definitely going to have to touch on that at the end, because I remember when this aired, people were up in arms over what the Doctor says and does at the very end of this episode. So we will definitely touch on that.
Oh yeah, people were upset. Although, like having watched the scene now, I'm not super certain why. But like you said, we'll touch on that when we get there.
So this actually begins in Aleppo, Syria, 1380.
Yeah, I think this is the first time in Doctor Who we've been to... Is it the first time we've been to Syria? Was the Crusade set in Syria?
Probably.
Yeah, I have a feeling that the Crusade...
Well, the Crusades...
episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they were in, like, Jerusalem... Well, not all of them. There was the one where they sacked Constantinople.
Yeah, the Crusades, like, themselves were a journey to, like, the Levant area... So I wouldn't be surprised if that... I mean, I'll just look it up and put it in the show notes.
Yeah, I looked it up. The Crusade, the episode, took place in Palestine, 1190, apparently, according to the wiki. The story was notable due to the Doctor's actions. He justified stealing clothes based on the fact that they're already stolen. I forgot about that.
Yeah, so we're in Aleppo, Syria. We're sort of in later we find out a hospital. And this woman she had a name Tamara, something like that. Tahira.
Tahira.
She's sort of freaked out by something, and then her, I guess it's her doctor. Is like, you know, she's like, oh, I'm so sorry to like hear that. Is like her response, basically.
Well, yeah, because Tahir like breaks out of the hospital, escapes the hospital.
Right. She's her whole deal is she says she's been seeing these like creatures or whatever in the night.
Yeah. So she comes back and is like, let me in, and yeah, like you said, the Doctor's just kind of like, yeah, sorry to hear that there's a monster out there, but I don't believe you.
Until she herself gets attacked.
Yeah, right. Like in the middle of the night. This is a cold open we should mention, which I know RG mentioned in Fugitive of the Jadoon, that there's more cold opens this season, and so
right.
Here's one of them.
And, you know, I'm not sure that, like, it really makes a difference.
No. I think the only benefit that a cold open has is that it delineates, like the title sequence can delineate between a scene that is with the Doctor uninvolved, and then when the Doctor comes into the story, which isn't necessarily required really in most stories. Yeah, it makes sense.
It's almost like this is the crime from like a crime drama. Like this is the setup, and now we're going into like the real story type thing.
Yeah.
And apparently the real story starts back in Sheffield.
77 minutes late.
The companions wanted to go back, I guess, for a quick visit. And I really like how this is woven into the story of the episode, how, like, this is a major decision for them of, like, whether they want to go back or not. And Yaz even mentions later on, at the very end, actually, how, like, you know, they can always go back whenever they want to whatever time period they want, but Ryan, like, makes a good point and says, like, but it's not the same for us. Like, we're still going in a linear manner, and that actually just makes things worse for us.
Yeah. Yeah, it kind of reminds me of when the doctor would be like, I'm going to age for like ever, and I'm going to have to watch you die, and I'm still going to be like really young, relatively speaking. I know that was something that Russell T touched on a lot with the 10th Doctor and Rose specifically.
Yeah. Well,
but
speaking
also
of
Martha
Rose, so
to an
the
extent.
Rose sequel has been released now, so we're actually thinking of doing something with that. Maybe a special episode or something.
Yeah, we're thinking of doing a quarantine special episode of Trust Your Doctor for all of you fans stuck at home like we are.
Yeah.
So look for that in the coming week or two. See if that.
Well, we can actually, classic Trust Your Doctor thing of just, like, deciding what to do on recording. We can actually just finish catching up with the show and then, like, do a, like, return to Rose, quote unquote, type thing before we really jump into, I guess Torchwood, although, you know, maybe we'll, yeah, Torchwood. I don't know.
Torchwood. I think it's pretty much certain that it's Torchwood. Yeah, we could do that because, you know, interestingly, I found out that we're about as far from Rose now as Rose was from Survival, almost. You know, modulo. I think in a couple months it'll be exact. 2 or 3 months it'll be.
Yeah, well, so we started
exact.
the podcast in January 2014, and then we watched Rose in, like, I think June or July 2017. So we're pretty much there. You know, double, yeah.
Yeah.
But, you know, we'll have to, like, figure out, or I will at least, like, how to obtain Torchwood. That's a thing I'll have to do.
Well, that's something that can be figured out.
I'm trying not to buy
podcast.
stuff online right now. Because, you know.
Yeah, I don't want to overwhelm the postal service, which is apparently collapsing, I've read, because so many people are ordering things.
You don't know who's touching the stuff you order. The virus can, like, live on surfaces, so not for long, I think, but it can.
Yeah. It can live on stainless steel for 2 to 3 days, but anything else, it's like 2 to 3 hours. So, in general, whatever it is, the virus will be dead by the time it gets to you if you just leave it outside your door for 4 hours.
So anyway, the companions are all sort of doing their own thing. They've all gone home. Yeah.
Yaz is, like, concerned because she's so
Yeah, well, I think she
late.
wanted to see her parents before they went out for something, but she didn't catch them in time. And she actually, there's a lot of cryptic dialogue in this episode between Yaz and her sister that we don't actually know. We don't know what that's about until the very end.
Yeah, it's very, like, one of my notes is when we see kind of the middle bit of the episode when we see her greatest fear, but, like, not the entire thing. I have a note here that's like, what is Yaz's greatest fear? Because, like, Ryan and Graham's really
I was
obvious,
actually I was
Yaz's?
wondering throughout this whole thing whether we were supposed to know what all that was or not, and we're actually not until the end. And that kind of reminded me actually of a Sergio Leone movie where it just kind of shows you these little snippets, and then at the end, like, you get a flashback and you're like, okay, that's what that was.
It definitely reminded me of that as well. Maybe intentionally, I don't know, something to talk about at the end, I guess.
So they're all doing their own thing.
So
Ryan's
like been ghosting his friend for like 3 months.
So
apparently.
This is I think his name was like Thibaut or something. And this is the guy we saw in Spyfall, right? For like 2 seconds.
Yeah, the one playing basketball with Ryan. Yeah.
So
I'm pretty
Ryan goes
sure.
over to his place, which is like actually huge. I don't know if it was implied that like he had any roommates or whatever, but if not, like he actually like lives in a mansion.
Alone.
So his friend is actually going through some like depression issues. I think they don't actually ever like explicitly say that, but that's what it really seems like.
Yeah, they pretty heavily imply it. Untidiness is definitely
And his massive
a
house
symptom of
isn't helping
depression.
like clean up or
Symptom.
anything.
Yeah. Although the untidiness is like, you might just be an untidy person, which I think is why they have Ryan say this line when he goes to the kitchen to make tea. He's like, normally this place is spotless.
Yeah,
What is
and let me
going
just
on, dude?
mention
Like, everything is a mess.
two like teenage guy or you know teenage/early 20s guys like drinking tea by themselves is like the most British thing ever.
That's the most British thing ever. Yeah, you're right. Honestly, I kind of expect them to be drinking like hard
Yeah, or at
alcohol,
least like I don't
vodka
know,
or nothing.
soda, yeah,
A
or even like
beer.
soda or something. But like,
Yeah, Ryan stood up. He's like, I'm going to go to the kitchen to get some. And I'm like, I really thought he was going to say, I'm going to get some beer. But he's like, I'm going to go make
yeah,
some tea. And I'm
I
like, what?
kind of did a double take there, but yeah.
I just love that meme that I'm going to try to find it because I remember it being really funny. It's Sully from Monsters Inc. and the first panel is like, do you want some water? And it's like British people going like, no. And then the next one's like, I'll put some leaves in it. And it's just Sully going, perfection.
It's actually really funny. Wow.
People didn't know South Africans drink like a ton of tea as well. Like you go to a South African person's house and they're like, you want some tea? And if you get tea at a South African person's house, it's probably almost always rooibos, which is like a tea specifically from South Africa.
You drink tea frequently?
Fun facts. Not frequently, but I do. I've got a tub of rooibos in the kitchen.
Yeah.
And tea strainer. Probably going to start drinking more tea now that I'm stuck at home.
Wow. So
Something
you're
to
really
do.
deep in the
I've already
quarantine.
started
If, like,
cooking
something
more.
to do is drinking tea. So Graham, meanwhile, is just playing cards with a couple of his friends, and I actually really like how this is done because it's sort of a subtle thing. But Graham's friends are like age-wise all over the place, and that actually makes sense when you remember that he's a bus driver.
Yeah. Yeah, his friends are pretty diverse. Graham's also apparently become an expert card player now, and he apparently told his friends he went on a cruise.
Yeah, no.
So for him, I guess it made more sense for him to ghost them for 3 months compared to Ryan, who just vanished.
Yeah, not the best lie you can tell someone, to be honest. Especially now in today's or like now's climate, but like also just cruises have never been the most economical or like good thing to do. So, you know.
Yeah, you also don't want to like tell a lie that's easily verifiable as
true.
false.
True. You also don't want to tell the truth because that sounds totally false.
I mean, true. Like, I think Tebow says this later. Like, Tebow's like, why didn't you just tell me the truth? And Ryan's like, would you have believed me? And Tebow's like, no, not really.
So meanwhile, the doctor is totally like unsure about what to do. She's like, maybe I'll just, zip ahead to tomorrow.
Yeah, because she tells him all that she's going to pick him all up at like lunch tomorrow. And I'm like, yeah, you have a time machine. Just zoot ahead 24 hours and be done with it. Because Graham's like, what are you going to do while you're alone? And the doctor's like, I don't know. And I'm like, probably nothing. She'll probably just zoom over to tomorrow already.
I really like this episode for many reasons, but one of those reasons is that we're really starting to tease out what the 13th Doctor is all about, and the fact that like she actually is hiding like way more darkness inside than we thought. And part of that, I think it comes out here where it's like she really doesn't have like a life outside of these three people.
Hmm. Yeah, it's I think every doctor, at least in the reboot era, has had like some sort of flaw that they've had to overcome through their
Mm-hmm.
episodes, right? The Ninth Doctor had his trauma from the Time War. The 11th Doctor was just incredibly like manipulative. The 12th Doctor was incredibly like codependent on Clara, and I think the 13th Doctor, it's that she's like complete. She doesn't know what to do without people
Yeah, I think it's
around.
that, and I also think it's a little more than that. So I think she like has crafted her entire like identity around Graham and Yaz and Ryan, but at the same time she doesn't even really like let them in fully.
Yeah. I think that's a better way of putting it. Crafting her entire identity around her friends, basically. But then you have to wonder, like, are they actually her friends if she's like withholding so much information from them?
Yeah, and I'm curious to see how this is going to play out in the season finale because she's definitely if we actually saw that before, but this episode is like a big shout like, hey dummy, like this is what's going on. She's definitely keeping them at like arm's length, but at the same time doesn't know what to
Hmm.
do without them. So
It's almost like in some ways a reaction to the codependence on Clara, because Clara knew everything about the Doctor, right? She literally was in the Doctor's time stream, and the Doctor got burned because of that. Because at the end of the day, he became so megalomaniacal almost that he changed time to save her. And so the 13th Doctor is almost like a hard U-turn from that, in that she keeps her companions at arm's length, partially probably because she's afraid of them leaving if they find out too much about her, but also because she's probably afraid of having to get burned again because she got too close to them and then she had to lose them again.
yeah, well, gonna be fun times when Graham, Yaz, and Ryan eventually sick burn the 13th Doctor, and that's
Oh, jeez. Turns out Chris Chibnall had this
well,
all
I mean,
planned
I
from the
actually
beginning.
like it. Kind of almost seems that way because like the way things are going, there's no way that the 13th Doctor is going to have these three companions for her entire run. Like, there's no way this isn't all leading up to them leaving, you know?
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, I agree pretty much wholeheartedly on that. Like, this has to be leading to them departing at some point, maybe in this year's special, maybe at the beginning of next season. Like, the fun part about being caught up now is we don't know when that could happen.
Yeah, and I'll just say, like, I'm actually way more invested in the overarching lore, I think, now that we're caught up. Because before, I would never, like, actually care. I would just always say, like, whatever, each Doctor Who story is its own thing, but, like, now I actually do. I don't know if that's the show being more, or paying more attention to that, or if it's just because we're caught up.
I think it's a little of both. I think the catch up part is, you're kind of discovering the lore along with everyone now, instead of like it's already there and you're just like, well, I just have to watch all this to be able to get to the most
Kind
recent
of, I
episode,
guess.
right? Anyway, the Doctor gets a kind of distress signal. Someone kind of invades the TARDIS and then leaves, and the Doctor's like, that's kind of weird. And she gets this distress signal, and she goes to Aleppo in
Yeah, so
1380.
there's, let's just touch on this. There's actually sort of a Terry Nation-esque naming thing here. So the doctor arrives in the hospital and she goes, oh, this place is called, Bimaristan, which she says, like, means hospital, which it does. So I
Mm-hmm.
don't know if I've actually ever mentioned this on recording, but if I have, it was, like, long ago. So I'm actually, like, half Persian, yeah, Persian.
Mm-hmm.
So I can like understand Persian / Farsi pretty well, and like it just means Bimaristan like literally just means hospital. So there you go, little hidden Terry Nation-esque naming there. Oh, I don't know.
Wow. Thank you very much, Charlene James.
I don't
Thank
know
you
how
very
hidden it is
much.
because the doctor actually mentions that. I think I don't remember the exact line.
I mean, like I didn't pick up on it that it was like a literal, almost word for word translation of like hospital, right? Like she just said, well, that means hospital, but like that could be like a colloquial thing. It could be like street slang. It could just be that name has like gone on in history to become meaning hospital, much the same way that Good Man Goes to War tried to imply that the English word
Yeah, that
doctor
makes
comes
sense.
from the doctor.
I was also a little confused about the linguistic like spectrum of this. Like I honestly don't know what language they speak in Syria. I'm guessing some form of Arabic. So yeah.
I think
So I
so.
I
I
don't
don't
know.
know.
I'll try and look up a little more and put it in the show notes. Maybe if I'm not lazy. If I'm not lazy. But anyway, there's some like Wendigo looking creatures about. So okay, do you know what the Wendigo is? It yeah, it's like this. Okay, so
Only
I
a
don't know
name.
why, but like I'm actually like really obsessed with Wendigos. There's like I have two weird obsessions. One is Wendigos, and the other is Kowloon Walled City. So, Wendigos are like this Native American slash Canadian like mythological creature, and they kind of
Hmm.
look like this. They look like these weird like lanky bears, and so kind of like the Chigaskas. Yeah.
Wow.
And there's one just like spidering it up on
On the
on the
roof.
ceiling. And what was her name?
Tebow.
To
No, no,
no
no.
to he
Oh, Tahir. Was it Tahira?
Tahira
Sorry, Tahira.
is sort of cowering in a corner.
Understandably.
Yeah. She's like the only one left or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Everybody else got attacked by the monster. I wrote down that it was a werewolf from Tooth and Claw.
Alien. Meanwhile, Tebow has been transported like elsewhere.
Yeah, this guy's finger just goes into Tebow's ear, and then he just like vanishes. And
Yeah, so
Ryan's like, "Yo, what?"
So we actually skipped this, but Tebow tells Ryan that he's been having these weird dreams about a really sketchy guy, and the sketchy guy's actually been appearing outside of his dreams as well. So he asks Ryan to like stay the night, which is probably good because where where does Ryan like live now? Does he live with his dad or like what? Just I don't know.
Maybe he lives with Graham.
Yeah.
Did we ever
We
know
don't
where
know.
Ryan lived? Like, did we know for certain that? I don't think he lived with Graham and Grace.
No, I don't think he did. Yeah, I don't know.
Damn.
But anyway, the point here is that Tebow gets abducted by this guy. And Yaz actually also sees the guy in her bedroom, or her actual, not her bedroom, her living room.
Yeah, continuing along the Yaz mystery, she's like at home and her sister's there and her parents have already left and they say something like marking the anniversary of whatever it is like good for them. And I'm like, oh shoot, is Yaz's grandma dead? Because I like couldn't think of anything else that would explain why they're just like so depressed sitting at this table.
Yeah, well, we find out later.
Yeah.
But like, does Yaz not have a room? Like, does she? Because she does live with her mom and dad and her sister, right? Like,
I think so.
so it's kind of weird. Maybe she just fell asleep on the couch or something. I don't know.
Yeah, no, she did because she wanted to watch a movie with her sister, and her sister was like, but you always fall asleep while we watch the movies, like on the couch. And Yaz is like, but I won't this time.
Yeah,
And then
classic
meanwhile,
Yaz.
Graham gets like a psychic vision of some lady who's trapped in a sphere.
Yeah, you definitely think that Graham is going to be contacted by this sketchy guy, but nope, he just has like this weird vision.
So they all immediately call the doctor, and she's like, wow, this is exactly like Praxis. We're all in completely different locations receiving completely related distress signals. Wow.
Yeah, this actually, I mean, this reminded me of what I didn't like about Praxius, just the disjointed nature of everything. But I feel like this episode, starting right now where we are in the summary, basically ties everything together in a much better way.
I think because everybody gets together like immediately as soon as it happens. Praxis spends a lot of time with everybody investigating their own mystery. And then when they do come together, they still split up because Yaz goes off and does her own thing, right?
Right.
Whereas in this one, they like all meet up quickly together. So,
Yeah.
and then they immediately jump into the plot. And I think this one also, the difference is at Praxis, they didn't figure out what the threat was until 10 minutes before the end of the episode. Whereas in this one, like as soon as they meet up and they go to this alien prison, basically, they immediately think they know what the I say think because it's a big twist. They think they know what the enemy is.
Right, and that basically happens right now because the doctor scans some of the Chigasca fur or whatever. I think that's what happens, and that leads them to like you said, like this alien sort of prison.
Yeah, she also uses the telepathic circuits on Graham.
Oh, right, that's what it was.
So they get there and they're like, oh, there's this prison trapped between these two planets that are like, or two stars, I don't remember, two planets that are
Those
like
two planets
falling towards each other, but they're not because of this prison in the middle. And she's like, man, the engineering it must have taken to build this is like incredible. Who could have built such a thing?
Turns out the answer is Zelen.
I really liked Zelen, I'm not going to lie.
I did as well. I think that's another reason why this episode succeeds where Praxius fails. Is that the villain is a lot more compelling.
Well, so they get to this prison and Yaz is like, hey, there's a wall of fingers over here. And the doctor's like, that's kind of weird. But then Tahira kind of wanders off and finds the head nurse / doctor, the one who told her, like, I'm sorry, that's happening to you, Tahira.
Yeah.
And
hey, go on.
I was just going to say the rest of the gang, for some reason, follows her except for the doctor.
Yeah, well, let's also not touch on how blunt the companions are here. So, like, Tahira is obviously incredibly shocked about what's going on, and I think it's Yaz just says something, like, just totally brushes it off. She's like, yeah, you get used to it. Like, we're on an alien world, like, type thing. Like, yeah, just blowing this 14th century woman's mind. Like, she's already surrounded by people who don't, like, take her fears and doubts seriously, and now that's only going to be compounded.
Yeah, I think that's an element of it being just like, this is just par for the course for Yaz, Graham, and Ryan. They're just like, well, this is just normal.
I think it also ties into like the themes of this episode at the end, where it's like, you know, people really need others to listen to their deepest fears and stuff. But at the same time, like, sometimes you don't, like, when you're listening to others, sometimes you just kind of brush it off. And that's actually totally what Yaz is doing here.
She probably just doesn't realize it.
Or just doesn't give a shit. No, I'm kidding.
Also true.
She probably doesn't realize it. So the doctor, like, starts working on freeing the supposed prisoner. Because... Yeah, oh, never mind. We find that out later. Never mind.
Well, she still thinks it's a prisoner. Yep. So Yaz, Ryan, and Graham kind of all get trapped in these nightmare worlds of their biggest fear.
Right.
And so Ryan is like, Tebow, it's him and Tebow, and the world is just on fire. And I guess his biggest fear is that he lost contact with his friends or ignored them for so long. They don't like want to be his friend anymore.
Well, Tebow was old in this scene.
Yeah.
And so I guess Ryan's fear is that, like, you know, life would go on without, or like he and like his normal life would just become so detached that they would, you know, miss each other for the entirety of his life, and he would just eventually, you know, grow old or whatever.
Yeah. And then, so Yaz is just like on a road.
Yeah.
And her sister's like, no one's here to save you, Yaz. This time you're all alone. And Yaz is like, what? And she looks around and like the cop has like disappeared and she's alone on the road. Which makes a lot more sense, like in hindsight, like seeing what her fear was. But
And Graham's fear is that his well, it's actually two things. One, it's that his cancer has come back. And two, it's that, what's her name? Grace blames him for her death. I can't believe I forgot Grace's name.
Graham's like the most blunt out of all of them because he's sitting there and she just goes, your cancer's back. You've got like a couple hours and you're going to die. You're just going to eat it.
I think maybe that's why Graham is at the end of the episode, at least, the most willing to like face his fears and then gets shot down.
I think he's also the oldest and therefore wisest. Yeah. Not therefore wisest, sorry. That's bad phrasing. He's the oldest and in this context, the wisest because he has the
Right.
most experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Glad you said that way and not the initial way.
Yeah, I realized. Yeah, I realized.
But they eventually wake up, and well, the doctor wakes up, and it turns out so she had actually we skipped the entire conversation, but she had already conversed with Zelen,
Yeah, I think
who she mentions.
what
Go
happens
ahead.
is that her conversation with Zelen happens after Graham, Ryan, and Yaz get captured, but before the Doctor gets captured. So we see
Oh,
their
gotcha.
fears, and then the Doctor has her conversation because then we cut back to the Doctor, and she's like, "Oh, I'm talking to myself, aren't I?" And then Zelen shows up, and that's when this scene happens that you were gonna explain.
Yeah, so the finger guy reveals that his name is Zelen, and the doctor knows this name. She says it's the name of an ancient god that she thought only existed in myth, but as it turns out, every single myth in Doctor Who is just actually real and is perpetrated by aliens. So, so but he also reveals his superpower, which is that he has been he's trapped, according to him, this being in this prison and is feeding her people's bad dreams and negative emotions.
Yeah, he says he's
and
been
tormenting her.
using the Earth and normal space. He says throwback to End Space. As like a game board for his games, and then he name drops the Celestial Toy Maker.
Yep, and the black and white Guardian.
Yeah, and the Eternals.
Yeah, so there's 4 things here that from the classic show that are just bam, one after another, just references.
Yeah, he just says the Guardians have their conflict, the Eternals have their whatever he says, and he's like, the Toy Maker would approve of me using this space as a game board.
This almost reminded me of how the modern Marvel movies go about it, and not in a good way. Because if you watch the modern Marvel movies, even the ones that are not too super connected to the other ones, in Doctor Strange, for example, there's a line the Avengers deal with the world's physical threats, but I forget what the society is called, we deal with the mental threats, to this world or whatever. And it's really do they have to be that interconnected?
Yes. Well, I think originally they were throwaway cameos, because if you go back and watch Civil War or the Winter Soldier, actually, they casually name drop Doctor Strange just in that movie, but I think that was supposed to be more of a oh cool, if you're a big comic fan, you're like, oh, I know who that is, but then later on they made a Doctor Strange movie, so it became oh.
Yeah, because that was before they came out with Doctor Strange. So the Doctor frees the prisoner. She's like, not this time, Zelen. You're not going to get away with your dastardly plan.
Yeah, and her name is Rakea, I believe, or Rakea.
No, I didn't know her name.
And
but, yeah.
She basically is like, yeah, doctor, turns out I'm not a prisoner, actually. And the doctor's like, wait, what? And she's like, here, let me explain. And we get this really cool 2D animation scene.
Yeah, we get a little infographic.
I don't know, I liked it. I thought it was cool. I thought it was unique.
I did as well. I really like the sequence. So before we touch on the content, I want to talk a little bit about the structure. So we go from, so she says, let me explain. We go to this little animation thing, and then we cut to the doctor being knocked out. So we kind of get that this was transmitted to her in a dream or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But watching this on BBC America, the last thing before the commercial break here is the let me explain. So I don't know. I feel like that kind of does this on a meta level where it's you yourself get taken out of the story, and then when you're back, you're in this weird, strange space, and then you kind of wake up like the doctor, and you're like, oh, what's going on here? So I like that. Coincidental, but I like it.
Huh. Yeah, I watched it on Amazon, and I had a completely different experience because she goes, let me explain, and it's a hard cut to just a black screen, just completely out of nowhere, and I'm like, whoa. It really gets your attention, actually, when you're watching the episode, and everything just disappears. It's just a black screen.
Yeah, so we're taken into their backstory. I don't know about you, but I actually found this backstory really compelling because it's told in the style of an ancient myth.
Yeah, the animation is very ancient art kind of style.
Yeah, it looks almost like Mayan or ancient
Mm.
Central American, something like that. Which to one to like the Western world is very exotic, but also just to the modern world is very exotic because like
It's ancient.
it's what's ancient and also like well a lot of like ancient like Central and South American culture was just destroyed by like Europeans. So like we don't
Yeah,
have
colonialism.
yeah. So like we don't really a lot of that stuff is like totally lost to time.
Hmm. Unfortunately.
Yeah. But so their backstory is that they were two super powerful beings, Zelen and Rakea, that is, who decided to just like use their unlimited power to just mess with people. they
They found two planets and decided to see who could mess their planet up first.
Yeah, when you think about it, when you really tease this out, like, man, why didn't they why didn't they have a wager of like who could make their planet like the greatest and most prosperous and the best for its inhabitants? Like, no, instead they were just warmongering a-holes.
Yeah, what is the quote? Power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. Think about it. We haven't seen a super powerful being who's like a nice guy.
What about the well, okay, no, I take that back. The thing in It Takes You Away.
The Solitract.
Yeah, the Solitract. I think the Solitract learns its lesson at the end from
The
the Doctor.
Solitract is the closest thing we've come to having like a super godlike being that's just like an alright kind of guy / girl / amorphous being.
/ frog.
The Toymaker was always pretty amoral, but and actually the White Guardian, I guess. Even though like it's implied near the end of that storyline that the White Guardian's motives may not be entirely pure either.
Yeah, a lot of these beings were sort of just chaotic and neutral, like.
The White and Black Guardian were like doing what Reika and Zelen were, but on like a cosmic scale, because the Black Guardian's like, can I mess up the entire universe? And the White Guardian's like, no, you can't.
Yeah, actually, kind of just mentioning the Solitract, like, the Doctor gave a whole, like, heartwarming speech to the Solitract, yet at the end of this, just shuts Graham down completely. Not a good look, Doctor.
I don't know. We'll get there. I have things to say.
Yeah. So anyway, the two planets eventually, got wise to the fact that Zelen and Rakea existed and were messing up their worlds, because they actually eventually went to war with each other.
And that's when they figured it out.
Right.
Turns out interplanetary communication solves a lot of problems.
So they decided to just trap Rakea, I guess, between the two planets.
Yeah. And Zelen couldn't open it because he's not from this realm, so he didn't have the ability to open it, which is why he lured the Doctor there.
Right. So her freeing, the prisoner was actually her, like, undoing that lock.
Yeah. Zelen talks about how he's fascinated with humanity for the same reason the Doctor, well, not the same reason, but the same as the Doctor, because he finds humanity interesting because they're apparently one of the only species that has so much self-doubt and fear and, I guess, depression.
Right. So he and Rakea decide to just go wreak havoc on Earth.
Yeah.
They do this. Did you find the conclusion to this episode a little disappointing?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, because
I don't know. I could kind of see how it fit into the themes of the episode, but it is kind of hasty, I think, is why it's disappointing.
Yeah, they kind of they wreak havoc on Earth for a little bit, and the Doctor enacts this plan to get them to 1380s Aleppo.
Yeah, we'll use it. She like hijacks the fingers.
Right, yeah, that's what it was.
And the monster that Tahira is afraid of, she ends up being able to control it because it's from her nightmare. And Yaz has this kind of cheesy line. She's like, literally conquered her fear. And Zelen's like, what is this? What is this? How do you do this?
So she sicks the Chigasca on them. And
And at that moment, the doctor is able to use the fingers to trap the two gods back into the orb.
right, but not before she has sort of a Ninth Doctor-esque speech about how regular old humans are the greatest things known to the known universe.
Yeah, she talks about how humans are great because they have self-doubt and fear and anxiety, but they conquer them through love or something.
Or something.
I guess you could conquer them through like greed or something. I don't know.
Hatred. I hate you.
You were my brother, Anakin. I loved you. I hate you.
So that's that. Everyone sort of just goes home. Tahira's world is probably just completely destroyed.
Yeah.
But we don't, touch on that. That's actually something this episode made me think about, is like how many people's lives have actually been, or let me put it this way, how many people's like psyches have been completely destroyed by not traveling, but just encountering the Doctor, and we don't see the aftermath of that,
Hundreds. I mean, remember Craig or Clive?
Yep.
Sorry, from Rose, who was like saw the Doctor once and then spent his entire rest of his life like tracking the Doctor through time, and then like ruined his marriage.
Tahira just goes back to her, you're never gonna believe this. I went to space and there was this woman who like had all this ancient tech, or not ancient, but like had all this tech, and it's not gonna go well, It's not gonna go well there.
Well, her doctor saw all of it too, so just like Tebow did.
Oh yeah, I think there.
Everybody in that hospital actually, because the doctor's like, we got to go get everybody out of the TARDIS jacuzzi, and I'm like, what?
Yeah, I guess they were there. I kind of just forgot that because they were such a non-presence. Even Tebow, honestly.
We didn't even talk about the Doctor's like dream, because after the animation, she is also in her greatest nightmare, and she escapes and she gets out, but she sees it's the same vision she saw in Spyfall, where she hears the voiceover from the Master being like, everything's locked behind the lie of the timeless child.
Right.
And we see that vision, and she sees kind of a child on a planet with purple sky, and that's all we get, really.
This at first this seemed a little shallow to me, of like the Doctor's greatest fear is something the Master told her like a very short while ago. But I think this episode helps put it into perspective, because the Doctor has very like little to hold on to, and now
right.
it's been hinted that she can't even like really trust her own past. So.
Yeah, and because of the fact that she keeps all like her fam at arm's length right now, she can't even like confide in them about these fears, because she doesn't feel like she can let them in.
So everyone just goes home. Tebow starts doing like group therapy of some sort.
Yeah. We find out Yaz was depressed and like looking for a way to kill herself, ?
I thought she just ran away from home, but maybe she was suicidal.
I think she ran away from home, but I kind of got the implication here that she was running away from home, just trying to like end her life. The cop shows up and she's like, we're worried about you. She's like, yeah, so what? Like, I don't want anyone to worry about me. I just want to be gone. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't pick up on that, but yeah, I think there's some of that lurking there.
I think the reason why I picked up on it more is because then the cop makes this like bet. She's like, yeah, if you like, I'll give you 50 quid if you like feel the same way in 3 years. But if you get better, then you owe me 50 pence.
Right.
And it kind of came off as like, if you like aren't even around in 3 years, then like you won't get the money.
Yeah, or like but also like because of the unevenness of the wager, she's essentially telling Yaz that she's like very sure that this isn't going to last and it's not permanent.
Mm-hmm. So then Yaz's kind of final scene in the episode is she goes and sees this cop, because it's been 3 years, and she's like, I've got something for you. And she gives her 50 pence.
Yep. I like the line from the cop, I flippin' do remember you. Like, imagine if she just like dropped the F-bomb right there in an actual canon official Doctor Who episode. Okay, so what would be more wild? That thing we talked about a few weeks ago where like a character on Doctor Who name drops like a Doctor Who podcast, like Radio Free Skaro, or someone like actually someone dropping the F bomb in like an actual official Doctor Who episode.
What if they just combined them and it's just a guy going, "Ah, man, what's that effing podcast? Oh yeah, Radio Free Scaro." Just in one sentence, do both. Yeah, can you imagine if Clive just like name dropped a bunch of Doctor Who podcasts in his search for the Doctor, or if whatchamacallit what was the group called in Love and Monsters?
Oh shoot, I don't remember.
Something with an N in it because it's like something.
Yeah, I don't remember.
If they just name dropped like a bunch of podcasts. Anyway, yeah, so now we get the scene where Graham tells the doctor, like, "Hey, I'm afraid of my cancer coming back," and the doctor's like, "I don't really know what to say."
Yeah, well, Graham is really going out on a limb here. He tells the doctor that like he's been very hesitant to say this to anyone, but he goes like, but you know, you're kind of a doctor, so I kind of want to tell you. And you get I got the impression at least that in saying this, he was sort of saying like, you know, I trust you enough to tell you, doctor, but like I'm too,
Yeah.
I don't want to admit that like explicitly. So
Yeah. Yeah, I got that impression too.
But then the doctor does something that I honestly never would have expected her to do.
I don't know. I think it's within character for the 13th Doctor. I also don't think it's so much blowing him off because I think she basically says, like, I'm socially awkward still and I, like, don't know what to say. So I'm going to go over here and then, like, I'm going to think of what to say. Like, to me, it came off as, like, her being, like, very genuine. Like, I acknowledge your fears, but I just genuinely don't know how to respond. And until I do, I'm not going to say anything. Because if I say anything, like, invalidating, then that's just going to make you feel worse kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, that's how it came off to me, was that she was like, I'm going to go think of the right thing to say. And when I think of it, I'll tell you what it was.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah.
But I can also see how a lot of people saw it as her just, like, dismissing Graham's fear, like, out of hand.
Yeah, that's kind of how I saw it, but, like, I think your explanation makes a lot of sense, because I think it would be super easy for her to just say, like, well, it's okay, Graham, like, you have us, but, like, really that have anything to do with his cancer. Like, whether he has them or not, his cancer can and, you know, maybe will still come back. So, yeah, maybe this was for the best. The doctor behaved like this. But I think a lot of people who have watched Doctor Who for a long time, and I'm counting myself among this group. I mean, I've watched it for 6 years now. Like have this idea that the Doctor is much more heroic, but this is a different take, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting because I saw a pretty interesting Reddit thread yesterday, 2 days ago, where someone was like, has the Doctor become, like, too nice? And his whole thing was, like, in the classic show, the Doctor was always very, like, callous towards people. And he cites, like, a couple Fourth Doctor stories where the Doctor is just like, I don't care about, like, one life because I'm trying to save the whole universe right now. And so basically this guy's point, or argument, I should say, was that in the reboot, the Doctor has become more, like, empathetic, I guess, towards the plight of the individual, so to speak. And so maybe this is just feels out of context for the reboot, but maybe in the you know, from the lens of the classic show is you know, actually more empathetic than what we would have gotten in the classic show, where maybe the Sixth Doctor or the Fourth Doctor, the second would just be like, yeah, well, oh well,
maybe,
kind of
yeah.
thing. Or the First Doctor even. So.
Yeah. But
I know the BBC had to release a statement that was like, guys, we weren't trying to offend anyone with that statement. Like, we get people are socially awkward.
Yeah, but even that is so weird that, like, I don't know. I just find it odd that, like, the BBC is like a company, that like a company would have to defend the actions of a fictional character. You know.
Yeah, it's kind of it's interesting to me how much of a role the BBC has played in this season. From editing the monster out of the trailer for Spyfall to releasing statements about this episode, as well as the Timeless Children, defending Chibnall in pretty much all of the statements. It's interesting to me, like, how much of a hands-on role the BBC's had to take this season with regard to that.
Right. And maybe in some way that's a good thing. I'm just kind of, I haven't really thought this through, but like, there's obviously a way that the BBC is like an entity, or at least how it's portraying itself, wants people to view these episodes, and people are not doing that. And that's in many ways like a good thing,
Yeah, I think it's better when we have critical discourse and opposing viewpoints about the show. I think there's I obviously don't live in the UK, so I don't know, but I get some of it filtered through Twitter that there seems to be some sort of joke about the BBC being a propaganda machine for the Labour Party, I think, or one of the two parties, because they're like pretty heavily that direction politically. Maybe it's part of that. I don't know. Again, I don't know a lot about it because, again, I don't live in the UK, and so I don't know. Maybe it's a situation where, like, here people know Fox is the like right wing news station, and MSNBC has gained this reputation now. I think probably justifiably is the left wing news station.
Right.
But I don't know.
Man, so what was actually funny though about this to me is that Yaz and Ryan are just like sitting right there. Like, we get another shot and it's just them. Like, I was like, whoa, they're actually just like sitting a few feet away from where the Doctor and Graham are. Yeah,
in my head I kind of justified that scene was like an hour later or something, and they had come into the room or something, because it'd be kind of weird if they were just sitting there like while Graham was pouring his heart out to the Doctor.
Yeah, makes a lot more sense, because I thought they were just like actually just sitting right there.
Yeah, that's kind of how the scenes are placed. So
But they actually have sort of a heart-to-heart as well. Ryan tells Yaz that he is like unsure about the future. He's like, man, like, what is my life going to be? Like, is it just going to be traveling with the Doctor and not living, with the people back home that I, care about?
Right.
Yaz tells him that she knows, or that Yaz tells him that they knew from the beginning that traveling with the Doctor wasn't going to be easy, and that, like, the Doctor said it was going to change them forever.
Yeah. So... Interesting. A lot of interesting stuff on this episode. I also, it's interesting how every like great being in Doctor Who history at this point, excepting a few, has been like part of a kind of duology. Zelen and Rekea, the White and Black Guardian, the Master and the Doctor.
Huh? Yeah. Are there any more that like fit into that?
I mean...
the Sontarans and the Rutans. No, I'm just kidding.
I mean, kind of.
Yeah.
Kind of. The Khalids and the Thals.
Yeah.
So there's always kind of a dual aspect to all of this, which I don't think there's anything deeper to it than it's easy to write. So.
Maybe. Yeah, I haven't thought too much about that.
Something to consider as we blunder straight forward into The Haunting of Villa Diodati with Mary Shelley and Lord Byron, another powerful duo in history.
Well, that's actually how this one ends. So the Doctor like gets all excited and she's like, "So Frankenstein."
Great. Here we go, boys.
Well, I think we touched on everything I wanted to say.
Yeah, we touched on everything I wanted to say. I do have a quote this week. So if we don't have anything else to say, I'll go into that, and then we can respond to Stephen's email.
Yeah.
So my quote is just this really funny quote. The Doctor asks Graham, like, if he knew where the prison that he saw in the vision was. And he just goes, yeah, definitely. You give me an A to Z of the universe and I will stick my finger exactly. No, I have no idea where it is.
Yeah, I really like that line as well. And I think that's a line like if as a writer that you sit down and you're like, man, I really hope the actor like does this line justice because this could be really good, and he did.
Yeah, it was good. It was really funny. I was so. I actually do want to mention just one quick thing that I really liked the special effect. Like when they went into and out of the dreams, it was kind of like a water painting, watercolor aesthetic almost that like spread across the screen, kind of transition.
I didn't actually notice that, but I'm sure it looked cool.
So it was really cool. I liked it a lot. So I guess that leads us into our email that we forgot to respond to for like multiple weeks. So oops, sorry, Steven. Hey guys. I've never sent an email to a podcast before or even listened to any podcast before. I decided to check out yours because recently I got through all Doctor Who episodes and whatnot from An Unearthly Child to The Time of the Doctor. I won't spoil it for Keon, but it has my favorite regeneration scene, even if the special could have been better. I'm really looking forward to Series 8. Now that Clara is not just a plot device, maybe she'll be a better character, right? I listened to your episodes about An Unearthly Child, The Daleks, The Edge of Destruction, and Marco Polo. Out of these 4 episodes, I've decided to wait another year before trying podcasts again. No offense. Anyway, if you guys are still around in years to come, I might listen to later episodes if I remember to do so, hopefully at the zenith of your podcasting careers. Maybe it's inevitable. By the way, I was surprised to hear in the Daleks episode that Dylan had neither seen nor read The Lord of the Rings. I highly recommend reading that, as well as The Hobbit beforehand. I actually saw The Hobbit, The Desolation of Smaug in December. I have mixed feelings about it and anticipate that I'll have mixed feelings about the third one as well. I honestly don't get why people are so obsessed with trilogies, as if they're the only type of film grouping to talk about. Anyway, I wish you all the best. Hopefully my email doesn't get stuck in the outbox. Been having issues lately. Cheers and Frasier, Steven. Clearly this email got stuck in the void of time.
For years.
Both like literally because we got to respond to it for a couple of weeks and figuratively because that's how the email is designed.
And it turns out that Steven, has a greater, more powerful crystal ball than even we do because he foresaw, our other podcasting endeavors like Zenith of Blake 7 podcast. Check that out. And another little classic sci-fi podcast. Check that one out too.
Maybe his crystal ball is like so we can see all of the history of Doctor Who, whereas his is really useless. He can only see the history of Decorative Vegetable podcasts.
But then he vicariously he can see the history of Doctor Who as well, can't he? Like if we can see the history of Doctor Who,
yeah,
he can
possibly
see the history of us.
Oh God.
So okay, what if there's someone out there who can see like the future history of him? Like then are they vicariously
No, stop. No. Too deep for me.
Yeah, that's like the thing we talked about in what was the episode? The I don't even remember what it was called. The one with the 12th Doctor and they're living in sort of an ancient like codex, and they go to the Vatican. I don't remember what that one was called.
The Veritas.
Yeah, whatever. I don't remember what it was called, and now this entire joke / thing I was going to say has been so drawn out that it's not even going to be funny or worth mentioning anymore. So whatever. Yeah.
So it was something, the Pyramid at the End of the World and the Lie of the Land. So the first episode in that trilogy.
Totally can't remember, but it's fine. Whatever. Just move on.
Yeah, well, that concludes kind of my thoughts for this week.
Yeah. I'm excited to have one last little adventure before things spiral.
Before the entirety of Doctor Who comes crashing down on our heads. Great. I can't wait. Oh, well. Well, yeah, so next week we'll be joined for the first time, so we have two new guests on the podcast. Keith next week, Stephen the week after. So if you'd like to email us, you can reach us at thedoctor@decorativevegetable.com. Questions, comments, concerns, angry rants, love letters, your thoughts on the end of Series 12. You can find us on YouTube at Decorative Vegetable. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify, all at Trust Your Doctor. Be sure to leave a rating if you like the show.
Check us out on Facebook, Trust Your Doctor. Like us on Facebook. Also check us out on Twitter at TYD Podcast, and follow us on Twitter. And next time, like we mentioned, we're going to be joined by Keith for The Haunting of Villa Diodati. But until then, the end.